The sun is climbing slowly. I hold these moments closely, closely now. These waves hit a little harder. I know they're gonna carry me somewhere. Step into the open wide. Watch the future come alive. This is our time.
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today for our first Bumble and Bumble Wellness Series, Managing Mental Well-Being Through Change and Uncertainty. I am Julie Cassidy, the Director of Sales North America East, and I will be joined by my colleagues, Kevin Glass-Krillick, Head of Sales North America, Christina Goldman, Director of Sales North America West, Suzanne Smallwood, Director of Sales of Education, and James Ruiz, Bumble and Bumble Educator, North America East. I have the privilege of leading on the Mental Health and Disability Employee Resource Group at Estee Lauder, Kindred. Kindred is an employee resource group that's mission is to build community and safety for employees interested in improving their mental health, disability, and or allies, caretakers of those with disabilities. We aim to promote wellness, combat stigma, and advocate for inclusivity by positively influencing how ELC supports all employees and customers to create a more meaningful experience with our brands. My role as a pillar lead is philanthropy and external engagement. It is through this role that I found Mel. I am passionate about being able to speak about mental health in the workplace. And from the moment I met Mel, I knew she would be the one to speak on this sensitive topic from a variety of perspectives to all parts of the business at Bumble and Bumble through this series she's delivering. My passion around this work is so important to me on both a professional and personal level. On a personal level, mental health is close to my heart, as two incredibly special people in my life have struggled with mental illness. My younger brother, who has bipolar disorder, and my daughter, who has depression and anxiety. I've two incredible people with intense private struggles whom I love dearly. My brother, once an incredible athlete with a bright intellectual mind whose life took a very different turn, and he's still struggling today. My daughter, Gracie, she struggled for a long time and is continuing to make her mental health her priority. I continue to be a supportive sister and mother that provides love and direction in the best way I can to them both. I am here today as part of Kindred to help make that difference for my colleagues, fellow salon owners, and stylists, to encourage everyone to open up the conversation about the mild everyday stuff to the really big stuff. Speaking about mental health in the workplace is necessary, and I'm so honored to have Mel with us today to share how we can remove the stigma and speak openly about how we are feeling, especially on today's topic around managing mental well-being through change and uncertainty. I would like to introduce Kevin Glass-Krillick, Head of Sales North America, to kick us off on today's conversation.
Thank you, Julie. Your dedication and commitment to this cause and your work in bringing this important event to life is so meaningful and appreciated. So thank you. I would like to start by saying that over the last year and a half, we have all experienced tremendous change, both professionally and personally. We have experienced new changes and challenges that required us to pivot in so many ways. Through our conversations with many of you, as well as being salon owners ourselves, We know how taxing the last year and a half has been on so many of us in this industry. We went from an industry that shakes hands and hugs when clients come to our salons to one where our interactions became virtual or through a layer of PPE. So many of our conversations turned from styling tips and the right products to navigating the million challenges we were all facing. Now, as we continue to move back to what for many of us resembles our old normal, we want to take a moment and recognize the change will continue to be inevitable, and how we manage through change is what creates not only success, but ensures our well-being in the process. Bumble & Bumble remains dedicated to our mission of supporting our network of stylists and salon owners with meaningful education. So I'm excited to kick off the first training in a series that focuses around wellness. Today's training will help in supporting you with managing the emotional and professional challenges of navigating change and uncertainty, and how to healthfully cope with this process. We will begin with a structured Q&A led by Suzanne and myself, and then we will have an open Q&A at the end of the session led by James. Please feel free to ask questions via the Q&A function throughout the session. Note that it's private, so people will not be able to see the questions that you're asking, and we will get to as many of the questions as possible at the end during the open Q&A. We absolutely encourage you to participate in this portion of the program, and you never know how helpful your question and the resulting answer may be for others. So with that, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce Melissa Doman. Melissa is an organizational psychologist, former clinical mental health therapist, and mental health at work specialist. Melissa has spoken, presented, and consulted for international, national, and local organizations and Fortune 500 companies across industries and across the globe, including clients like Salesforce, Siemens, Charlotte Tilbury, and Legal Guardian, and our very own Estee Lauder Companies Global. Melissa has one core goal: to equip companies, individuals, and leaders to have constructive conversations about mental health in the workplace. She also has a book coming out in October, a practical guide about how and why to talk about mental health at work. Welcome, Melissa, and thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to kick us off with a question that certainly has personal meaning for me, as over the last year and a half, I've personally been through a roller coaster of feelings and concerns. So the question is this: we have been dealing with the pandemic for 18 months now. And on top of that, our industry has also seen significant change in so many ways. In general, why is coping with change and uncertainty difficult? And why does what we're all feeling now, in some ways, feel more difficult than what we experienced in 2020? Can you talk us through some of the major feelings or concerns we may be experiencing and why we feel this way?
So thank you so much for having me. That's such an important question. And what's really interesting is, let's start with really just the physicality of it all. So change and uncertainty, even for folks who are thrill seekers or love new experiences, generally speaking, can be really uncomfortable for our brains. Our brains, despite the amazing things they're capable of, are actually kind of lazy and don't really like change and uncertainty because it interprets it as a threat in our environment. So for example, all of the changes that Bumble has gone through, it feels stressful, but the primal structures in our brains cannot tell the difference between ups and downs at work versus a saber-toothed tiger in the corner that wants to eat you. Your amygdala, that basically regulates fight, flight, or freeze, cannot tell the difference between a perceived threat and an actual threat. So if you think about that in itself, on a biological level, all of this change and uncertainty is not doing us any favors. And it's still kind of early days. We're still shaping what that next chapter is going to look like, because there's no going backwards. There's only going forwards. And that's really difficult for a lot of folks to accept. And so if we think about 2020 versus now, honestly, it's a lot of those same stressors, but it's almost amplified because we just can't seem to catch a break. When 2021 came, we go, oh, new calendar, maybe it's going to get better. Let's hope that things are going to return back to normal. But then it almost feels worse because in some ways, this continued uncertainty and the continued, change, it feels a lot worse because we can't seem to catch a breath, no pun intended. And it's really quite challenging in terms of if you think about the industries that you guys are in, for example. There's been a lot of change there. So, for example, the closing and opening of salons, changing protocols, and honestly, going even deeper, frustrated clients that can't get a basic need or necessity filled, where for a lot of people, for example, getting their hair done can be connected to feelings of confidence, feelings of their self-image, basic grooming, things like that. And also, if you think about the natural associated health risks from working in a salon, being in that close proximity to other people, that in itself can present a challenge. So if you do all of that, coupled with the fact that we can't seem to catch a break in 2021 versus 2020, it's complex and interesting to say the least.
Thanks, Melissa. Super, super helpful, at least to be self-aware. It was super, super insightful and helpful.
Wow. All right, Melissa, same stressors, but you can't seem to catch a break. That was so powerful. It actually gave me chills because when I think about one of my favorite quotes by Nelson Mandela, he says, "Do not judge me by the success, judge me by how many times I fell down and get back up again." And so when I think about resilience, I would love to know from you, why is it important to acknowledge our strength as a wider team on how resilient we've been and will continue to be in this ever-evolving conversation about mental health?
Honestly, and let's keep in mind that it is so important to acknowledge the real expletive stuff that's happening right now, because it's really stressful. And by saying, oh, it's going to be fine, silver lining, that's not helpful either. However, they have to exist in balance. There has to be the acknowledgement of all the struggles and the pain and the fear. However, acknowledging how resilient you've all been and the teamwork you've put forward, it really, number one, not only is it true, but number two, it takes the edge off. You have to acknowledge how resilient all of you have been in terms of dealing with these changes, because not everybody can do that. So for those of you who haven't given yourself a literal pat on the back, and Suzanne and Kevin, I'm going to ask you to do it. Give yourselves a pat on the back right now, because you guys have had a really tough time. And if you think about resilience, the definition of that tends to get warped depending on who's talking about it, where it's being spoken about. And it's because it means different things to different people. But if you think about resilience, it's our literal ability to bounce back healthfully from encountering adversity. It's a nice neutral definition we can all use. It doesn't mean pushing through to your own detriment. It means literally getting up off your knees and bouncing back from that challenge. And that is not, it's not easy. And there's so much division in the world, and it's quite tribal, that just taking stock of the fact that you guys have had each other's backs and you've been able to get through this as a massive salon network family, that's really significant. And so while it is important to acknowledge the challenges we're all going through and not sugarcoat it, it is also important to acknowledge the silver lining about how you guys have all stuck together.
Thank you so much, Melissa.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Melissa. Yeah, a great reminder it's about getting up, not pushing through, and also to give ourselves a pat on the back. I think it's been a while since I feel like I've recognized that. So thank you for that moment today.
I'm all about snaps. Yeah.
Certainly everyone on this call and, and all of the presenters today certainly also need some snaps and pats on the back. Yes. So thank you for that.
Sure.
So next question is, our network has had to take on a lot of challenges in the past year where we've had to adapt our skill sets based on changing environment, dynamic environments, updating safety protocols, and adapting to changing client needs. What are some of the challenges with adapting in the moment at work?
Gosh, I think the question is, what aren't the challenges? So, I was talking about before that our brains like certainty and predictability, adapting at the moment at work is anything but that. It runs totally counter to that. And there are lots of people who like, working on the fly, whereas for other people, that's like as painful as the heat of 1,000 suns. And for lots of people, it's somewhere in between. So the thing is that when you're adapting in the moment at work in ways that you're not as familiar, you haven't done it before, what it ultimately comes down to is that it's pushing you out of your comfort zone, and it puts your belief system about your own capabilities right on the chopping block, and we don't realize it. So if you're adapting in the moment, you're instantly questioning your self-efficacy, your belief in yourself to be able to achieve. You're potentially questioning, am I an imposter? Can I actually do this? Are people going to find me out that I'm not capable of doing this? And also, if you think about, this might sound very rudimentary, but in a lot of ways, you don't know what you don't know. And that's not your fault. If you haven't been exposed to doing a certain type of task, if you haven't been exposed to a certain type of process or whatever it is, you don't know what you don't know. And you're literally forced to learn in the moment whether or not you succeed. But keep in mind that success when adapting on the fly is very subjective. There are, for example, certain things you need to accomplish or certain metrics to meet or certain behaviors to do, and those can be, quantified. However, in terms of success, that's very subjective. So what I would say, and take it from someone who is incredibly hard on themselves, if you've been adapting on the fly and you didn't get it, perfect, which by the way, I encourage all of you to let go of that word from your vocabulary, A, because it doesn't exist, and B, because it's a social construct that is incredibly destructive. All you can do is try your level best and be okay with the fact that it might go up and down in terms of adapting in that moment. But I have news for you. You are not the only person doing that. There are lots of other people who are going through the exact same struggles, and they just might not be vocalizing it because they're afraid of judgment. But I guarantee you that lots of people are freaking out about adapting on the fly because they don't want to fail. Fear of failure can be debilitating. So if you are feeling that way, and if you're adapting in the moment, you weren't exactly pleased with the outcomes, whatever, take comfort in the fact that there are lots of people feeling that way and you are not alone. It doesn't take the panic out in the moment, but it should take the sting off overall.
Thanks, Melissa. Super helpful to just as a reminder that I'm not the only one on the journey. The ups and downs, and other people are there too. So
yes, we're all freaking out together.
Love it.
Yeah.
Well, Melissa, you are just dropping so many gems for me. I'm writing as you're pushing yourself out of your comfort zone. You don't know what you don't know. Fear of failing can be debilitating. Wow. And as Kevin mentioned, it's like hearing this, it's like, oh, okay, I'm not alone in this.
Gentle reminders.
Right? So as a new leader myself and a newish mom, I've tried to be honest and also vulnerable about mental health over the past year in the workplace, with my family, etc. Can you share some ways that leaders in the salon industry as a whole can look at how they can look after themselves and set a constructive tone around mental health and also the importance of it?
Yeah, for sure. So I think it's also important to acknowledge a couple of really major challenges that leaders have gone through in the past, 18 months. I've lost total track of time. I can say it's July 92nd, and that would sound like a real date to me at this point. So the thing is that generally speaking, when people have a leadership title or a leadership role, even in the before time, people look to leaders for answers. They look to them for security. They look to them for comfort. They look to them to be the oracle. So even before the pandemic, talk about pressure and the fact that people forget that leaders are also just people. They're people first, they're leaders second. And so it's really difficult with the pandemic kicking off that a lot of us are looking for reassurance or comfort or security, and leaders can't always give that to you. And in a lot of ways, they're looking for that themselves. And so I always think about the metaphor of the oxygen mask that you have to put your own on before you assist someone else. However, a lot of leaders, even before the pandemic, but especially now, the oxygen mask has literally been tossed across the room and they can't reach it, or they think they can't reach it. So when it comes to mental health for leaders, you have to let go of the myth of the infallible leader. It is so completely untrue and makes leaders think that they have to be strong all the time, have all the answers, support everybody else, and not take support in return. Complete nonsense and so unhealthy and unreasonable. So if you think about what it takes to manage your own mental health as a leader, crawl across the room and put your oxygen mask on, because you are no good to anybody if you're literally passed out. So you have to be able to acknowledge and adopt, I am a good leader and I can show up for others when I first show up for myself. And that is a healthy adult practice. And so the ways of doing that, and we'll talk about some ways to manage mental health shortly, is you have to prioritize mental health as a priority and not do so secretly. So in terms of, one of the ways to even just receive support is also to acknowledge that, yes, you can support your team members, but they're also allowed to support you. You're all chronologically aged adults. I don't know who came up with this arbitrary rule that team members aren't allowed to support their leaders when they're having a tough time. So I challenge that narrative with ferocity, because why can't it be a two-way support system? And then if you think about your comfort levels in terms of self-disclosing maybe some, mental health struggles you're going through or something that's going on for you, human beings, generally speaking, will do things that they see other people doing successfully. And what I mean by successfully is that if you as a leader are sharing about your own mental health struggles, that literally gives the explicit permission that they can also talk about that topic. Because what would make them think that they can talk about it if their boss doesn't talk about it? And so it really does help in terms of giving that explicit permission, where it's not that you as a leader are encouraging the conversation amongst the team. You need to participate. You can't just say, oh, you guys can talk about mental health, you have my full support. That's great. But if you're not participating, it will fall flat. And so when it comes to setting that constructive tone, you are in a position of influence. You are in a position to create change, and it has to start with you. So it's really giving that explicit permission, participating in that conversation, making the team understand that mental health is not a dirty word. Mental illness is not a dirty word. Stress is not a dirty word. And so it's really about finding moments to create space for those conversations. And that doesn't mean it's turning into group therapy. It doesn't mean you're becoming a therapist, doesn't mean you're becoming a doctor. Talking about mental health at work is developing a skill set like any other skill set. And it's basically incorporating mental health discussions at work into the literal fabric of workplace discussions. And it's really about keeping the conversation consistent and not making it seem like a checkbox exercise.
So the fabric of influencing, creating change in space, and participating. I love it. Thank you so much for that.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you, Melissa. So much in that. I feel, for me, realizing between leadership, in my role and managing, just like Suzanne, my two daughters with homeschool and et cetera, over the last year and a half, I feel like I'm not even sure where my oxygen mask is. So after this call, I'm going to go. I think it is. I'm going to go find it. So thank you for that. And two,
sure.
It's such insight in how I could be a better leader by laying the groundwork of just supporting the conversation around mental health with my team and opening that door and ability to have those conversations. So thank you for that.
Sure.
And I think the other thing I wanted to call out, because I think it's also important that we acknowledge the mental health impact of being a client-focused profession on top of coping with the evolving situation we've encountered over the last 18 months. With that being said, burnout can be a real potential risk. So what does emotional burnout look like? And what are some signs that our team should look out for?
That's a very good question. And I also am happy to call upon examples of when I used to be a clinician. So when you're in a client-focused industry, no matter what industry you're in, when you are client-focused and the experience of a client that you interact with is one of the top priorities, that is a lot of pressure, because human beings are not controllable, not quantifiable. There's a whole range of experiences, even ones you can't prepare for. So if you think about just acknowledging the additional stressors of having not having clients to answer to, but clients that you're impacting, there's a lot of significance there. So I think it's important to acknowledge the additional stress that can come from that. And so, back when I was doing full-time clinical, I absolutely at certain points got impacted by, my clients' experiences, my clients' stories, emergency situations, things like that. And because you are naturally carers for people who are in the chair, they talk about life. They talk about life with you. They don't, the majority of them don't just like sit there in silence as you're doing, your service for them. But a lot of them are opening up about things that they can't really talk to other people about, because that salon is a safe space and you are an objective, neutral person. So all of that stuff they're saying to you doesn't just go off into an abyss or a void. You are hearing it, you're experiencing it. And so, for example, I'm quite spongy, I'm very empathic. So if I am absorbing a lot of stuff from people and not taking, self-care time, whatever, I feel that not only emotionally, but also physically. So let's say burnout, for example, and we'll be talking about the stress curve shortly, but burnout is basically way on the other side in the red zone of the stress curve. And it basically means that your body is shutting you down because you didn't pay attention to the warning signs ahead of time. That's basically what that is. So when you look at the signs of burnout, there's emotional, physical, behavioral. So it can be very different for different people. There are some people that get irritable or angry or have trouble concentrating, or they're not playing nicely with others, or there's some people that start to withdraw, communicate less, get easily overwhelmed, have crying spells, they're not sleeping very well. These are all warning signs that your body and mind are saying, warning, warning, breakdown imminent, stop before you hit the end of the road. And if you think about physical, somebody could be complaining about more headaches or back pain or stomach distress, or their skin's breaking out. Your body can create physical manifestations of emotional distress. It is a connection as old as time itself, that mind and body are connected no matter what. And so if you also think about the behavioral, it's just changing in how people communicate. It's changing in how they behave. And the ways to notice this is that if you know somebody's baseline and you start seeing outliers of behaviors that are starting to become more and more consistent, generally speaking, something could be up and they're just not talking about it. They may not even notice that it's happening because they're just so on autopilot, going. But that's where good mental health conversations can help when it comes to noticing that someone is on the edge of burnout, or as I like to say, they're becoming a little bit crispy.
Very helpful. Thank you, Melissa.
Yeah.
Crispy, I like that. I'm going to use that for sure. I'm going to have to definitely use that. So when you think about self-care, right? And, the word is used very often. With all the change that we continue to experience and probably are going to experience for many, 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 many months and years ahead, why is self-care and being aware of those warning, why is it so important right now? And what are a few things that we can do emotionally to take care of ourselves?
So in addition to it being really important now, it has always been important. It's just that people weren't talking about it as much. And if we think about the emotional self-care, because that's very specifically what we're talking about today, is how could it not be important? Just let that sit for a minute. How could it not be important? The brain is an organ like any other organ in the body. It is a healthy state and an illness state. And that organ governs our ability to stay alive, to interact with other people, to do work, to innovate, to function, to speak, to do all of these sorts of things. So managing mental health, emotional self-care must be a non-negotiable. And so there are three things that I'd like to recommend, one of which is a creation of my own. And the reason why it's one of my favorites is not because I created it, but because people say it's useful and they say it's easy to use immediately as of today. So mental well-being non-negotiables are basically a few things that you do at a cadence that you decide, a frequency you decide, and things that are unique to you that make you feel emotionally good. So not what the wellness industry tells you should make you feel emotionally good, but what actually emotionally makes you feel good. That doesn't mean, do high risk things that might be of risk to you or other people. But if you don't, respond well to meditation or yoga, then you don't have to do those things. So for example, and keep in mind that doing your mental well-being non-negotiables, you want to start small, start off with one or two things at a reasonable cadence that you decide, and you have to do them except for cases of death, dismemberment, hell, or high water. Those are your only excuses. And so if that means it's walking the dog 20 minutes a day, 5 days a week, that's what that means. If it, if it means singing Cardi B in your underwear in the living room, that's what that means. If it means, playing on the ground with your kids a few times a week, that's what that means. You have to pick something that is unique to you, not what the wellness industry tells you should feel good, because then you're just not going to do it. So for example, one of my mental well-being non-negotiables is salsa dancing. When I do salsa dancing, my mind totally clears. I'm not thinking about anything except for following the movement of a hopefully good lead and listening to the music and just being there. And since the pandemic kind of kicked that out the window because you're literally in each other's faces, breathing in each other's faces, I started dancing in the living room once a week with a mostly willing husband. And it was great. And the music was good. And I got to twirl around and the dog was confused and it was great. And now that things are kind of opening up, I go with a mask and I make sure to be careful, and I'm able to start doing my mental well-being non-negotiable again. But just start with a couple of things and stick with them. If you start with 12, I wish you the best of luck in doing any of them, because it'll just feel overwhelming. And the good news is you can define that and literally start today if you want to. And no one is responsible for doing that except for you. The next couple of things I would recommend are really simple, easy models that you can use in terms of filtering out the stressors that you have and kind of like trimming some of the drama out, which actually in turn helps with emotional self-care. So the circles of control and influence from Stephen Covey, I am obsessed with that model because it is a literal instant filtration system that you can use to identify if a stressor is actually in your control or influence. Most of the time, it's not. So the whole model looks like a bullseye. You have what you can control, which is obviously the smallest circle. The next circle out is what you can influence, slightly larger. The next circle out is what I like to say, you have no chance, I wish you the best of luck. So you gotta, for example, people post that model literally up on their wall, and they put one stressor per Post-it note, and they start putting them if they think it's within their control or influence. And by the end of that exercise, a lot of those move to the outer circle. And all that remains in what you can control and influence are the simple basic things. And so anytime a stressor comes up, and keep in mind, this is a practice to develop. It's not going to happen overnight. And as somebody who's really good at worrying, I will tell you that it really does take practice where something comes up, you go, is this in my control? Yes or no? Is this in my influence? Yes or no? If the answer is no, you have to develop the practice to let go and focus on other things. If it is in your control and influence, the best thing you can do is take action. So I literally have that model printed up on my wall. because I'm so good at worrying that I look at it and I go, okay, this one's not in my control. I have to let it go and move on to something else. So I highly, highly recommend using it. It's an instant filtration system. You can start practicing today. And then when it comes to the stress curve, also known as the Yerkes-Dodson law, it's a really good way to watch out for your mental health because it is a visual representation of how crispy you're becoming. So it's basically like a different color palette rainbow. It looks like a half semicircle, where in the middle, you have the optimal zone. You're feeling like you're concentrating, you're focused, you're purposeful, and all those wonderful synonyms. But then when you start tipping in either direction is when you get in trouble. So there are people that post it up on the wall. They put a little cutout of their face on the end of the stick, and they post it up on there, and they move it throughout the day depending on how they're feeling. And, in the before time, there were teams that would post it up on the wall with all of their faces, and it would move throughout the day. And then if somebody was in the red zone, they go, I'm just going to leave John alone until later, until I see his face move elsewhere on the graph. And so the thing is, when you tip in one direction, you start getting irritable, angry, burnout, breakdown, plop. But in the other direction, it's a different type of stress where you start feeling understimulated, unhappy, depressed, isolated. And then the model calls it lame, not in the way that we say it, but lame as in like a lame horse, like that they're injured, they can't really function. So being understimulated, not purposeful in your work, feeling disconnected is equally stressful to your mind and body, but just in a different way. So the key takeaway from that is mind the tipping point. That's what you want to do. I can't recommend enough printing out that model, putting it up on the wall. Whether or not you want to do your face is up to you, but you can literally position how you are vacillating throughout the hour, the day, the week, the month, the year. And it just helps you to visually remember to mind your tipping point. So those are the 3 things I'd recommend.
I didn't realize I was going to run out of paper, Melissa. I don't even know where I'm taking my notes anymore. The idea of this reasonable cadence and, creating what's unique to you for that first step, that's really powerful, right? Like your salsa story really hit home for me as like, what brings you the joy that you can kind of reset, that control and influence.
Yeah.
And then the mind, the tipping point. One thing just for the people who are logged on, can you share again? I want to say I captured it. Stephen Covey, what was the book name?
Yes, absolutely. So it's Stephen Covey, Covey. Actually, Here is the book. Oh no, my background is messing it up. It's the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
All righty.
It is a tome, very, very thick. And he's kind of an esoteric writer, but the key takeaways from this book are awesome. Really awesome. Couldn't recommend it highly enough if you have the patience to get through 370 pages. But Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Melissa. Yeah, and that was just a reminder, I think I do a really great job at making sure I have my wellness pieces, that I take my moment every morning to kind of ground myself in that, but to have those tangible tools around the circle of influence and what is important. I try to do that exercise in my mind 100 times a day, but, to be able to tangibly do it and see it visually, I think would be so impactful. So thank you again for that reminder. And yes, such a great book. Through this whole conversation, we've talked a lot about having conversations around mental health at work. And so what I'm wondering is, what are some simple ways to have more open and constructive conversations around mental health at work? And how do we have meaningful conversations about mental health? And what does good look like here?
Yeah, so I'm going to give the highlight reel because, as you know, I wrote an entire book on how to do that. So I'm going to give you just a few highlights. What I would say is a lot of people, and it's very well intended, they say, I don't want to bring it up because I don't want to pry, or I don't want to be intrusive, or I don't want to say the wrong thing. the biggest thing I can say is showing authentic care is not intrusive. Again, showing authentic care is not intrusive. And honestly, you don't know the last time that person might have been asked how they were doing. How ridiculous is that? Because a lot of people, you know, human beings can be naturally self-centered. We can be naturally self-focused. That's not a bad thing. It's just how people are. But we can also be wonderfully social creatures that support each other and be there for each other and protect each other. And showing that care and just asking how someone is doing and actually meaning it, and actually letting them know that it's okay to actually say how they're doing. Because when people say, I'm fine, fine is not an emotion. Fine is not a state of being. And anytime someone says that to me, I go, why don't you try again? I'm kind of a bit of an a-hole when it comes to that. I go, try again. I'm not going to take that answer. And people, it's a general human basic need to feel heard and understood. So if you look at, and we can type this into the chat, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, MASLOW, it shows all the basic needs that need to be met to achieve something called self-actualization. I'm not going to get into that now, but feeling heard and supported and understood, those are basic human needs in terms of feeling socially secure and safe. So it's really about, if you notice someone doesn't seem like themselves, it might be because something's going on, but don't ever assume the reason. Until that person tells you why, assume you don't know the reason. And so generally speaking, people don't like to be told how they feel. They don't like to be told how they act. It comes off as an accusation. So you want to notice you want to share what you've observed, saying that you noticed it, and then seeking to understand why that might be happening. So let's say, Kevin, I'll take you as an example for a moment, if you don't mind. So let's say, for example, the last couple of weeks that you didn't seem like your wonderful smiley self, and you seemed a little flat. And I noticed that it happened on several occasions when we spoke. I would say something like, and obviously you want to do this in a one-on-one setting, not in front of other people and blowing up someone's spot, but basically saying, Kevin, I kind of noticed you seemed a little flat the last couple of weeks. Is everything okay? And so he has the total right to say, I'm going through something, but I really don't want to talk about it. He doesn't have to share with me. He's under no obligation to do so. But then the response is, no worries. I just want to let you know I'm here if you ever want to like get a cup of coffee or chat or whatever it is. Or if he says, I'm really not doing so well, my kids are going through some things, I didn't want to bother you. Then I go, it's not a bother. Do you want to chat now? Do you want to talk tomorrow? What works? Create the space, share what you've noticed. Don't place judgment, give the option to talk. And on top of that, you want to ask the type of support somebody wants. It doesn't really feel good if somebody just wants to vent and word vomit, and they encounter a fixer who acts as if they know the entirety of that person's life. Well, here's what I did, and this is going to work for you. That is a great way to piss somebody off and make the whole conversation about you. So somebody, you might want to say, do you want me to listen? Do you need help like sorting through something? Find the words that work for you, but ask what type of help they want, because you'd be shocked the number of people that have never been asked that in their life. Because generally speaking, people, they just want to be helpful. So if someone's having a problem, humans generally go into either fix it mode or, oh, that sucks, and then they just move on. So try and ask the type of support that somebody wants. And you want to ask questions, don't make assumptions about what they're saying, help them understand that their privacy is valued. You're not going to go spouting off stuff to other people. And don't judge. Ask questions, seek to understand. Good supporters ask questions, they don't give advice. And then also at the end of it, ultimately, you want to encourage people to try to take action or self-manage it, especially if it seems like they could benefit from talking to a counselor or seeing a doctor or whatever it is. Normalize that that's okay. reaching out to a therapist should be as normal as seeing a gastroenterologist if you have IBS. It should be no different at all. And lots of people have IBS. So, that should be no different. And just be clear on, are there any next steps? Did they just want to talk once? Do they want to catch up in a couple of weeks? Do they need to talk to their manager? Make sure that everybody's clear on, what's coming next, because you don't want to feel like it's being left awkwardly billowing in the wind. And lastly, mental health conversations are not linear. You will not go from A to B in one conversation. And so it might feel, quick, or you don't have time for a full deep dive. You don't need to spend 2 hours talking to this person. It might just be a 10-minute catch up, and there might be more there. So it could be, we both have clients, let's talk at the end of the day, or let's talk tomorrow, or whatever it is. But don't put pressure on yourself that you're going to have this like nice, neatly tied bow, and it's going to be this perfect conversation in 10 minutes, bing, bang, boom, this person is off on their merry way. So just be conscious that people are complex, therefore these conversations will be complex. And the last thing I'll say is, for you helper fixer types, like myself on this call, take off your superhero cape. Take off your superhero cape. You could be supportive to this person. It is not up to you to save them. It is not up to you to fix their problems. It is up to you to be a supportive human being that makes them feel heard and understood. That's it. But for the rest of it, you guys will have to read the book.
Fantastic tools. And yes, looking forward to the book, most certainly. I think I'm a fixer type. I 100% of it. And, that dawned on me, ask what type of help someone needs. I'm not sure if I've done that before. So that, excellent. So I think that's my big aha moment for today.
Hey!
Get out of my fixer self and ask what type of help someone needs.
Snaps for Kevin. Oh, yeah.
Kevin, I love that, right? It's like, okay, but I know what I need, but what do you need? And Melissa, I love that you said take action, that your mental health is as important as your IBS gastroenterologist appointments. Like, why do we make time to do everything else except for our brain, which you mentioned is our largest, not our largest organ, but a organ. So thank you for that insight. You're just dropping so many gems today. I was excited for this event, but I didn't know I would be taking away so much being a part of it this way. So thank you.
I'm like a ninja. Like
that. Yeah. I'm like, come on. So Melissa, do you have any parting advice for us, any guidance on reaching out for mental health support, right? What does that action look like?
I do. And I'm going to be short and simple about it. When it comes to you, start taking action today. If you feel like you're struggling with your mental health, and it doesn't even mean that you have to have a diagnosed condition, by the way, it could just be that you're going through tough times and you just need to talk to somebody. So take action today for you. And then if there's someone that that's struggling, you've been meaning to talk to them, but you haven't wanted to seem intrusive, start the conversation. It doesn't mean that you're going to be an expert or a therapist. You can even say to them, I want to be supportive to you, but I just want to make sure I do it the right way. Like, how can I be most helpful? Or say it however it sounds like you, but just start taking action today. One thing for yourself, one thing for someone else. And reaching out for therapy is normal. It is a healthy adult practice. And anybody who says anything counter to that just doesn't understand its purpose, and they are going to be left behind in the changing of that social narrative. And if they say anything mean to you, you just send them my way and I will set them straight.
I don't think they want to mess with this ninja who's dropping all these gems, Melissa. I don't know. Well, this has been just beyond delightful and also just incredibly insightful as a new leader. Partnering with Kevin throughout this time of uncertainty has been filled with ups and downs. And so I'm just grateful to have the support of Kevin and Julie and Christina and have you now as well. I know that we are welcoming questions. And so we have James here, who is our Bumble educator in North America for the East, who has been filtering through some of those questions. So I'm going to kick it over to James so that you and James can really dive into a little bit more of the personal questions that have come up through this. So thank you again. And I will kick it off to James.
Great.
Hey, hi, I'm so excited to be here. This has been really, really informative. And as you know, and as my friends out there in the network know, like I'm so into this conversation and I think it's so important. So thank you for being here to do it with us.
Oh, my pleasure, truly.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's dive right in. So we have a great bunch of questions for you.
Awesome.
The first being, there's a lot of judgment of being vaccinated versus not vaccinated. How can leaders of salons create a place of inclusivity of differing thoughts/opinions when it comes to hot topics like vaccines?
Oh, that is such a good question. And I've been talking to a lot of people about that because people are feeling so emboldened with how they're feeling and very tribal. I keep using this word tribal because that just feels right. And it is a very personal decision in terms of getting vaccinated or not. I'm very comfortable to share that while I am vaccinated, I was terrified to get it because it was rushed and it's still a virus we're still learning about. And I was like, oh my God, this is created so quickly, but what do I do? And I think it's important to respect those individual differences. And even if you don't agree with someone, it doesn't mean that you should shame them or make them feel like crap or embarrass them because you don't know why they're making the choice they're making. And while you might disagree with it or it might make you angry, it's really about finding shared understanding and compromise and civility. And even though people have different personal, health protocols, and that can cause a lot of arguments, it's really about ultimately acknowledging that you may not agree, but finding shared understanding and compromise on what you can agree on. So for example, if you're not vaccinated or you are vaccinated, but maybe as a team, you can come up with shared, health and safety protocols, even beyond what's in the salon that you can all agree on as a form of showing up for each other. Because trying to convince people and bring them to your side makes people naturally defensive and angry because it makes them feel like they're being told they're stupid and that you don't like their choice. And even if you privately feel that way, you shouldn't make somebody feel that way. And so focus on what you can agree on and what you can understand and how you'll, communicate with each other with respect. That's all you can do. And it's a very interesting, evolving conversation. A lot of my deliveries with companies right now are how to navigate the difficulties of those conversations because psychological safety and physiological safety are being challenged. So find what you can agree on because trying to browbeat people into your belief system is not going to fly.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, that is 100% true. And I mean, I think what I hear you saying is communication is key when it comes to it and not just
don't assume.
Yeah, assumption or throwing your opinions into like trying to force them on someone is never going to work, right?
No.
Yeah, I love that. And that actually kind of leads us into our next question, which is, how do you recommend stylists work together when they have different viewpoints on masking versus no masking, so that everyone can feel safe? I know you mentioned a little bit about like conversations, but is there anything specific you might suggest?
Yeah, for sure. So that's a really good question. And there's a couple of things. So number one, as I'm sure you guys are aware, depending on the state you live in or even the county you live in, some folks are going back to you have to be masked indoors because of the Delta variant. So for example, in the county that I live in, as of today, by law, you need to be masked indoors, no exceptions. And so it's a combination of following your local government guidance. But on top of that, masks are also now seen as a social artifact. And what I mean by that is that somebody who adorns an object on their body is communicating to somebody a value that they have. And so people are attaching meaning as to whether or not you're wearing a mask. And so people, again, they're very opinionated, very tribal about masks. But again, it goes back to shared understanding and shared compromise. So in addition to the local updated laws and guidance and things like that, it's trying to find agreement as a team. So for example, if some folks are really against getting vaccinated, would they be willing to wear a mask inside the salon for the safety of everybody? But that doesn't mean that only unvaccinated people have to wear it. Vaccinated people should be doing it too, because you don't want them to feel like they're being relegated to social Siberia and they're being punished. You have to wear a mask because you're not vaccinated. No, if they're going to wear one, you're going to wear one too. And so it's really about finding what are the common rules and the common ground that everybody can agree on, so people don't feel like they're being punished. And it's, everybody needs to use their big kid words and, find ways to meet each other's mutual needs, not preferences, because needs and preferences are not the same. Needs are core things that have to be kept, like physical safety, versus preference. If you don't like the feeling of a mask, tough. That when it comes to the physical safety needs of yourself and everyone around you, if that means feeling a little uncomfortable by wearing something, you will survive and it will be okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, I definitely know that at Bumble, we've had lots of meetings about it as a team to talk about sharing each other's feelings around it and also safety levels. And I think, to your point, sometimes that's the best way. I love the idea of really looking into your state and your county's specificities, but also putting your own little salon love into it as a team.
Yeah. Who's stopping you? Come up with what works for your team.
Yeah. I love that. This was another great one too that I really love. So do you recommend salons create small support groups amongst staff to learn on each other with all the change and uncertainty, or is it too close to home when they are seeing each other throughout the week?
Oh, I love that idea.
I think it's lean on each other. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I love that idea. And the nice thing is you can be creative in what you name it. You can decide how often you guys want to have, those sorts of discussions. The only thing I would say is be very, very clear on the purpose and the function and the rules of engagement. Because if you're not, it will go off the rails. So if you want to have once every couple of weeks, once a month, it's just a place to create space and a place to honestly talk about how you're feeling without judgment. But before that, come up with, these are the okay behaviors, these are the not okay behaviors. Because if you don't all collectively agree on what that is, people will go down their own paths, and that doesn't always turn out so well. Speaking as someone who used to facilitate, group therapy, things like that, and I do group coaching now, you just want to make sure everyone has collective agreement and you're on the same page. Being very clear about what it is and what it isn't.
That's cool. That's a great idea. I love that. And it makes me think too about something that you mentioned earlier about how your body doesn't always necessarily know when it's a real threat or just a threat from your internal mental state or anxiety. Do you have any specific ways of sort of calming yourself down or soothing yourself when you're in those moments and feeling those when your body is really feeling pressure and anxiety?
Most definitely. So some of the ways that can come up for people is, I say, pay attention to body temperature, pay attention to your heart rate, pay attention to if you're clenching your jaw, And if you start sweating, that's your body gearing up to fight the saber-toothed tiger, but it can't tell that you're just having a disagreement with a colleague. Yeah. So in those moments, what most people actually don't realize, and this sounds so basic, but it is true, when you are breathing into your chest, you're signaling to your nervous system that there's a threat in your environment. Most people don't realize that deep diaphragmatic breathing, also called deep belly breathing, signals to your nervous system and to your amygdala that you can calm down and there's no threat in your environment. The trouble is that deep belly breathing is not very physically attractive because you're like pushing your tummy out. But the nice thing, I'm serious, it makes me look like pregnant. But the thing with that is it's not a rushed process. So you want to inhale through the nose for a count of 4, hold for a count of 4, exhale for a count of 4, exhale through the mouth. And when you just try and keep doing that, it will literally lower your cortisol levels, lower your heart rate, cool the brain down. It doesn't happen immediately. Again, that's a practice, but just create space between stimulus and response. Take a breath. It sounds so simple and so basic, but it helps in all kinds of conflict, whether it's, marital, friendships, work. Take a breath. Create space between what you're receiving and what you're throwing back. Because when you get triggered and you want to respond, taking a breath isn't exactly a priority. So that would be the biggest thing is take a breath the correct way and create space between stimulus and response. Yeah.
Wow. That's great. I mean, that's giving me a lot of ideas because I feel like, when our salons opened up in July, I kind of like tried to go back in gung ho and like with the mask on and all the new regulations. And, now I'm hearing about you like thinking or hearing you say this, like taking a deep breath. And like in the past few months, I've given up trying to talk to my clients while I'm blow drying because I can't hear what they're saying over the blow dryer with the mask on and my mask on and the goggles. Yeah. It's like a whole thing. So now I'm thinking maybe that's a good time to just kind of like check in, do some breathing exercises, and really kind of just like get in my body and calm my mind before I transition into the finishing and the next client and all that stuff. So
yeah, for sure. Cool. And really just saying I say to myself, if someone says something to me that is just ugly or horrible or whatever it is, inside my head, I literally say, pause, give myself a minute, and then I try to respond. But that took years of practice. So yeah.
I mean, and you mentioned that earlier too, is like these lessons take time to like build.
They do.
Yeah, I think that's a really big takeaway because I feel like, we live in a culture of like immediate gratification. So it's like, knowing that it's okay that I'm not nailing it right away and that it is going to take time to like slowly adapt these new systems.
Exactly.
That's so cool. I love that.
Yeah.
Okay. And so this next question came in. How do you take care of your mental health and maintain motivation when you feel that you're not fairly compensated for the tasks you're being asked to do?
So that's a very complex question. And what I would say is a lot of times we are not, it depends on if you've had those sort of self-advocacy conversations. And if you feel as though you're not being compensated in a way that you deserve, then it really comes down to conversations with people that can or potentially cannot influence that situation. So for example, some people feel that way privately and they haven't said anything to their manager. They haven't said anything to anybody else. So if you haven't, there could be an opportunity to speak with someone, your manager or something like that, but coming at it from a solution-oriented point of view, as opposed to potentially an I'm unhappy only point of view. It has to be both. It has to be I'm unhappy because, and this is what I would like to do about it. So it's really coming with solutions in mind and building your case as to why. Because if you're going to bring that information to somebody who can influence it, you have to tell them what to do with it, and you have to tell them the case. There is also the unfortunate reality that depending on what the financial situation is of the salon or whatever it is, you might not get the outcome that you want. And that is very frustrating. So then it becomes a decision of, can you find a way to be okay with this current situation, or are there other changes that need to be made? And that's not necessarily bad. That's not necessarily negative. People, they get nervous about the conversation because it means, oh, or I'm quitting, or I'm doing this, and this is horrible. If your mental health is suffering and it's not the right setup for you, you would be doing yourself a favor if you are making a decision to go down a different path. That doesn't have to be a villainous decision, but ultimately you need to start with a conversation. But you have to say why you're unhappy and what you would like to have done about it, and be participative in that process, as opposed to going to a manager saying, I'm unhappy, I want to be paid more. That might not go over so well. Alternatively, if you could say, I really do feel I should be compensated more. This is why it's bothering me that I'm not, and it's making me feel this way. What can we do about this?
Yeah. I mean, that you're right. That is so complex, because I mean, as a salon, we've had to like adapt so many different ways of dealing with like scheduling and booking and timing, and I mean, we've all taken pay cuts when it comes to like our clients in that sense. So that's a great answer. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that, Melissa. That's a good one.
My pleasure.
Yeah. This next question is, what are some good ways to break the ice when the person you're trying to reach out to shuts down and you're challenging with getting them to respond?
That is a very good question. So when people tend to shut down or not want to open up, it can be for a whole host of reasons. It can be that they are uncomfortable with those conversations. It could be that they've opened up in the past and someone responded poorly or betrayed their trust. There are lots of reasons. And also, they may not even know they're doing it. They may not even know. So if you're trying to support somebody and they're shutting down or stonewalling you or whatever it is, you can't push them before they're ready. So it's really helping them understand, I'm here if and when you need me. I do want to be able to support you, if you're willing to let me, but also remember that it is not their job to fulfill your need to support them. Yeah. So if they don't want to open up to you, that's their right. And if you feel like your desire to help is not being filled, that's your problem. That's not their problem. And so really just letting them know that you are there if and when they need you, and that you are experiencing them as shutting down, but you want to understand why. There could be a whole host of reasons why they're shutting down. But just remember that the desire to help, the desire to support, that's a you thing. That's not something that they need to answer for.
Yeah. Wow. You're dropping, like Suzanne said, dropping so many like big aha moments.
Yeah.
I love that. And I think too, like, it is there. I've been a hairdresser for, like 16 years now, 17 years. And, there is definitely a stigma about like being emotional or being vulnerable in the salon. There's stigmas of like, oh, she's dramatic or he's dramatic, or, you know what I mean? And I think the biggest overarching thing is just to be okay with being flexible and be okay with like sharing these emotions. Because, I mean, most of us spend most of our lives at work, more than we do at home. So, yeah.
And honestly, I think that the mental health conversation goes both ways. I think that a lot of the onus is only put on the supporter, and I don't think that's accurate. I think that people need to know how to support in a good way, but also people that need support need to be constructive in how they ask for it. So, people are not mind readers. They can't tell what you need. And if you're going to share certain things at work, you're going to share certain information, share certain emotions, you got to tell people what you want them to do with it. You can't just display for the sake of displaying. If you have that display, that's fine. But then you have to inform the people around you what you want them to do with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Melissa, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. I'm gonna thank you for answering all these questions that we got.
Sure.
And thank you guys for throwing the questions out there, first of all. So I'm gonna pass it off to Christina to give us a little send out. So thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Thank you, James. And Melissa, there's so many, I literally have pages and pages of notes for takeaways.
Yay!
And just thank you. It's such important reminders, that we have all these great tools in front of us, and we've probably even practiced them from time to time, but it's really about, making them part of our regular everyday process and routine wherever we can. I know that's not easy, so I'm not trying to say that it is, right? But I know that so many people on this call are feeling seen today and heard, and we have you to thank for that. But I also want to say that our panelists and the willingness to share their own personal experiences too. This is what it's all about, right? We're all here. We are all on this journey together. And, I think that there's something that we can all take away that'll help us get through this journey together. And just keeping that in mind really makes the journey that much more doable. We're going to survive this, and we'll continue to survive. Some of the things that really stood out for me is how important it is to acknowledge not just our own resilience through these tough times. And we have definitely all have, different experiences that are unique to ourselves, but to acknowledge and recognize the resilience and how we've all gotten through this together as a hairdresser, as, front desk person, as a leader, and, even just speaking on behalf of this panel and for all of the team that works at Bumble and Bumble. I just love the idea of really acknowledging that and in some cases celebrating each other for what we've been able to overcome. So huge takeaway for that. And also just empathizing with each other. I think that the more we can empathize with where somebody may be on that journey of change and uncertainty, or how they're responding to having, to make a decision about getting vaccinated or whatever it is, if you can just for a moment stop and just, empathize with where they're at. And know that you don't know where they're at necessarily, that it just gives you a little bit of extra space and patience in order to accept one another as we should, continue to. So, I know that because we've had the pleasure of working with you internally, Melissa, with our team. And one of the things that has really stuck with me is how important it is to take action. It's one thing to just talk through hear all these great things and have things resonate, but then, what do you do with it? And so I want to just kick off the idea of taking action on the most simple thing, which is, the mental well-being non-negotiables and identifying what they are for ourselves. And I literally had this epiphany last night or yesterday. What's important to me in non-negotiables is to carve out time with my girlfriends. As a mother, as a professional, as, somebody who's always taking care of my team and all of that. It's like, wait, what about me? Right. So I do feel like that is something where I truly come into connect with myself again is through my relationships with my friends and my girlfriends. And so I'm going to carve out that time, take action on that 100%. But thank you for reminding me how important and how easy that is, my walking as well, making sure that I'm doing that because I feel at my best when I have time to breathe and be in nature and all of that good stuff. And box breathing, which you described. So for those of you who are not familiar, Melissa mentioned, breathe in for 4 seconds, hold it for 4 seconds, breathe out for 4 seconds, right? It's that box breathing technique that has really actually helped me get my, sort of level set and calm myself when I was feeling a bit anxious. So thank you for that reminder as well.
Oh,
Again,
sure.
it's just making these things part of my routine that's the work, right? Is we have to put in the work for ourselves. So, all that said, those are how I want to take action. But Melissa, do you have any other recommendations or follow-ups of how those on the call can take action from here?
I think one of the best things you can do to take action, in addition to, prioritizing your own mental health, making the space for other people to have those discussions, I think one of the best thing you can take action on is actually around resetting the level setting of your expectations of others. Mm-hmm. We are all trying to do the best we can. We are organisms in a volatile, changing ecosystem, and everybody's responding in a different way. And some people are having behaviors or thoughts that they have never had before in their life, and they're trying to figure out how to deal with that. And that is not always going to be pretty. So I would say the biggest thing to take action on is just resetting your expectations about being a little more flexible with each other, and that people are still figuring out what okay feels like, what good feels like, what bad feels like, and just giving each other a break. That's the biggest action I think that we could take.
Amazing. Well, I know you have some great tools that we'll be sharing out with everybody that was on the call today. We'll be sharing out some follow-ups and key takeaways that Melissa has put together for us. And thank you so much. I want to thank you on behalf of everybody on this panel. And I'm sure many people on the call where so much of the information has resonated are so grateful for having this time with you, Melissa. And we are so grateful for having this time with everybody on the call today. So we hope that you have a wonderful rest of day and look forward to the next in what will now be a series of wellness opportunities and time together. So thank you, everybody, and take care.
My pleasure. Bye, everybody.